First of all, if you could just give a brief introduction on yourselves and the role that you're in, and how you sort of come into this space of tech and equality. Katika, do you want to start? It's great to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. I am happy to start. So my name is Katika Roy. I am the founder and CEO of Pipeline. Pipeline is actually a software platform that increases the financial performance of companies through closing the gender equity gap. I'll just tell a little bit about that very quickly. We actually started with research, which showed that for every 10% increase in gender equity, there's a 1 to 2% increase in revenue. That's the model that we actually operationalize through our platform, which is essentially making all HR decisions equitable.
Thank you. And Vanessa, hi, welcome. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. So hi, everyone, dialing in from New York. And I lead SAP IO's Foundries in North America. SAP IO is the early stage venture arm for SAP, where we work with early stage startups that are in enterprise technology. We have a fund, and we also run these programs in 9 locations globally. And a hallmark of what it is that we do is that we focus on underrepresented founders. So we have a commitment where at least 40% of the founders that we work with across the fund and also across our accelerators are led by underrepresented founders, so women and people of color. And in New York, everything that we do there is 100% focused on underrepresented founders in enterprise technology, which really is making a very big difference because through the work that we do, we tie them into the SAP ecosystem and get them in front of our customers.
Thank you. And Fimbi, hi, are you still in London?
I am. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm probably going to make the record of probably being the longest person here so far, since everyone is all on the other side of the ocean. But it is a great pleasure to be here today, and thank you so much, Julie, for inviting me. So, unlike the other 2 colleagues, I think, Vanessa, hi, it's nice to see you again. I am what I would call a technology practitioner. So I'm kind of the operator. So I spent a lot of my time as a CIO executive working on digital transformation, most recently at Adidas at the moment, to really kind of help them in that digital transformation and journey. But spent about 25 years in the IT space, and prior to that in finance. But a lot of it is around disruption. How do we use technology as an enabler to help support your business, either to enter new territories or new markets, or really help us make wise decision, and whether it's around data or whether it's around just change as a whole. I think we've coined the word digital transformation as a new buzzword. But for many of us that technologists know that word transformation has been around for a long time because technology is an enabler. COVID has enabled it for us to probably accelerate and really have the importance of technology at the boardroom and at the executive table. So that's what I do, and it's a pleasure to be here today and talk more about that. Thanks.
It's great to see you. Thank you. We talked a lot this week about how the pandemic has played a role in worsening the economic impact on women during this time, and how the pandemic's played a role in accelerating the use of technology to progress equality. Katika, we know that the current global gender gap will take over 108 years to close. And economic gender parity, I think, remains about 200 years off. How has the pandemic made this worse, and how is Pipeline working to fix it?
Yeah, actually in the last year, so we don't know specifically how the pandemic has impacted it. We'll probably know early next year. But we've actually added 55 years to that 202 number. So we're now 257 years away from economic gender equality. We've actually added time. So what's interesting about what's happening right now is we sit during the pandemic and the economic fallout, we have this nexus of the move to remote work, the talk about gender equity, and then also the talk about our economic recovery. So just to give people kind of a sense of what's happened during the pandemic, particularly for women, is that women's jobs are actually 1.8 times more vulnerable than men's job in the economic recession, the fallout from COVID-19. They've also had an 8-point gap in the jobs that they've lost, at least in the United States. That is, they're 47% of the labor force, but 55% of all job losses, as well as they're also lagging in being hired back. One of the issues with remote work is that we know that could actually set us back in gender equity. So how might we use artificial intelligence for that not to happen? Because we know that women become more invisible, they're viewed as less valuable already, and when we move to remote work, you know, that actually has the chance of moving backward. And so what Pipeline is doing, you know, there's a lot of move toward automation and HR decisions, is ensuring that that is actually equitable. So what we do is we actually intercept HR decisions across the 5 pillars of talent, which are really the big buckets of decision making for companies. So hiring, internal hiring, mobility, pay, performance, potential, and promotion. And what we do is intercept those decisions, run them through our algorithms, and then if there's any bias, we actually make recommendations and move companies not only toward equity, but also toward the best financial decision for their company.
Thank you. And Vanessa, what have you been seeing in the tech startup space and in the investment space since the pandemic hit in terms of technology specifically supporting gender sensitive issues or a more equitable future?
We are actually about to launch next week a cohort completely focused on the future of work out of our San Francisco foundry. What was really interesting in the call for applications, seeing the tide of startups that were coming in, there were so many more that were focused on diversity, on well-being, on talent management, but through an equitable lens. And it really resonated with our customers and also with our executives who were part of our selection committee. And actually what we're finding is that this whole entire cohort is all focused on various aspects of that, which is something that we're very excited about. What we're hearing a lot from our customers, because they are the ones who drive and tell us the pain points that they're looking to solve for, they are saying that, you know, obviously talent management, keeping their high potential talent is critically important, but how do you do that in a way that is going to be fair, that is also going to be acknowledging the differences that people are having? I think that Katiko was already pointing out just like how remote work has been having a lot of adverse impact on a lot of working women. And so those are the types of technologies that we are bringing into the fold. I can't reveal the companies because we're going to be releasing our press release next week, but many of them are tackling this exact area.
That's great to hear. And for me, it seems like the pandemic's made companies more consumer focused and consumer driven. And I think those companies that are surviving or thriving have got a sort of acute focus on their customers and on their consumers. How would you advise companies to use technology to change and to become more transparent and to drive to solutions that consumers will see real value in?
Yeah, I mean, I think the misnomer that companies have never been consumer focused, I think they all have been. And so that's kind of first, premise, and just to set the stage that everybody has been. The underlying element is about how do we use the data, right? The technology exists. How we use the technology in the past has always been great. I mean, whether you're partnering with large platforms like the SAPs or the Salesforce or whatever, or even bespoke startups, Vanessa, in the world to help amalgamate and getting the solution in place, has always been in existence. I think what we have sometimes, depending on which industry you're in and who your customers or your consumers are, has how we've used the data, which is really what we now call in digital transformation. It's not about it's not a technology solution. It's about the digital element and how quickly do we want to use that data and build those capabilities to enable us to make insightful decisions. And also the element around the fact that, we all have choices now. And post-pandemic, the choices we thought were not possible because the cost of investment or the technical debt to make those changes have obviously been right in our face to saying, actually, that was something of a facade and we all have to change. But again, it was data that we've already had before. So it's about how do we use that a lot more to help us provide those insightful decisions. What we need more so is what I would call spongeable and flexible architecture that enable us to switch things quickly so we can be reactive. Our consumers now are becoming more impatient, right? The cost to change is it's in seconds, not days, not months. And we have as providers or solution or corporations have to be able to react towards that. And it's how we do it. It's those capabilities that enable us to do it in the flexible way that's really going to help change. And the companies are doing it a lot more quicker and not looking at the cost of investment. They're looking about how do I achieve to get my customers quicker, irrespective of the investment, because I'll reap the benefits at a later stage. So it's changing that mindset, and it's a cultural change, and it's a huge change management for a lot of organizations. I think that's what a lot of us are grappling with at the moment.
And I guess it's just a long-term value, isn't it, as well, and long-term investment. What for me, I'm interested in, because you touched on some of the sort of companies that are getting this right. What sectors or industries do you think are doing a better job at innovating for equality and using data?
And I mean, that's a great question. That's assuming that I'm aware of in depth in all the industries. But I would say that the best way to look at it is companies that are very in tune of serving their customers or their consumers quickly and very reactive will make a better, probably a lot more successful. I had the opportunity to watch your last two sessions around purpose, right? And around, the whole sustainability. I think consumers are more focused around what that is. So it's not just about the shirt that I'm wearing, but where is it coming from? And the ability for us to be able to be transparent and trace it all the way through, make it meaningful, make it more excitable. Customers are going to be able to do it. And companies are able to, the companies are able to show and demonstrate that much quicker than others are the ones that are going to be successful. So whether it's in retail, whether it's in CPG, or whether in some expense, even if you look at the fintech world, because they're really helping to really focus on that individual and you feel connected. Those are the people those are the industries I think will make a better way than others. So I think everybody within the verticals, there's usually one or two where companies that pave the way, but I can't say there's absolutely one, because saying one makes them complacent, because everybody at the moment wants it. We're speeding along and no one has an answer. We're just trying to do the best we possibly can.
Thank you. And Katika, what role does artificial intelligence and automation play in the creation of an equitable world? I know the Pipeline Equity platform uses it, but I'd love you just to share a bit more about how you're using AI.
Yeah, absolutely. I can talk a little bit about that. I will tell you that we believe that AI actually can hardwire equity into the future of work. That is our premise. And we found that to be true. So just to give you a sense of what that looks like, Pipeline has found across their implementations that there are really three key decisions that companies make across their talent each year, which is performance, potential, and pay. So for the average Fortune 500 company that has 60,000 employees, that's 180,000 opportunities to move toward gender equity each and every year. One of the things that we've found is that you can't close the gender pay gap by starting with pay. that in actual fact, pay is the symptom, it's not the disease. So in other words, pay is this quantitative value that you place on your talent, but the actual talent, the actual value happens before in performance and potential. So some of what we do is actually use natural language processing to actually call out bias phrases in performance reviews, calibrate ratings themselves, and actually essentially give equitable value both in performance and potential that is being developed for future leadership positions in companies. That widens your pool of talent in your organization, but it also helps you attract more diverse talent. One of the things that we focus on is internal hiring. And the reason is that the best way to attract diverse talent is to ensure that your existing talent is successful, and not just in their current roles, but across your company. That is equity of opportunity. So that's some of the ways that we actually are using AI to ensure equity within organizations.
And just to expand, Katka, if you will, on the unconscious bias piece of that. So, yeah, because there's a lot of complexity in that, and obviously the information that gets put in the first place, right?
Well, that's true, and I think, you know, one of the things that we also focus on is intersectional gender equity. So gender plus race and ethnicity and age. We are intentional about that focus of those things being connected and not separate, which is some of the issue. But for instance, some of the things that we found through our implementations is that women's emotional state is commented on a lot more than men's emotional state, versus men's tend to be very task oriented in terms of their performance reviews. We've also found that if a company has like a name for someone who displays their culture, right? So at Google, it would be a Googler, or at Charles Schwab, it would be a Schwabby. That in actual fact, women are held accountable for showing, demonstrating those cultural values versus men are not. So if they don't show those cultural values, they can still get ahead. And that was sort of an aha moment for our customers who said, oh my God, like we thought we were doing the right thing about talking about culture and how important it is. And yet it was just another way to put bias and sort of, in essence, sort of create this barrier. One other really quick thing I just want to mention about what we've done, you know, there is right now for companies, it's sort of this choice to be equitable, right? By default, our systems are not equitable. If they were, women would be 51%, at least 47% of the Fortune 500 CEOs. One of the things that we've done is if you have pipeline, your system, your human capital decisions are actually by default equitable. That is, so if you think about the 401k, you know, the 401k savings rate, it had been, you know, low, probably still is pretty low, but one of the things that companies did was to auto enroll new employees in 401k savings plans. And what happened was that the savings rate went up. Why? Because now instead of choosing to enroll, I have to choose to unenroll. So we do the very same thing by making recommendations. Now I have to, if I'm going to reject one of Pipeline's recommendations, I'm actually choosing to not be equitable. That's a very different way to move toward equity within our HR decisions in companies.
Thank you. And Vanessa, what emerging trends do you think will make the biggest impact in this space and the biggest impact on equality? You touched on sort of workforce transformation. Are there other trends that you're seeing that you think will really shift us forward?
So workforce transformation, I think just in general, thinking also about how different like enterprise AI is now, we're really at just like the cusp of what's going to be happening there. It's really been prevalent in some industries, like for instance, in media, for instance, and how that's been deployed. But over the last few months, we've seen a tremendous applications just across many different industries as they're using AI to just like very quickly like go through, for instance, lots of insurance claims, or to be able to get into manufacturing to enable that to go faster. So this whole entire aspect of how can you digitize and transform these industries that much more quickly in general, that timeline has been smushed. And so things that we expected to happen, say 3 to 5 years out, are starting to happen now. So I think over the coming 12 months, it's going to be a very critical period in many, many different industries. And so that's something that we're really looking out for. And to think about, where does equality become especially important? There are industries, obviously, like Fumbi knows retail extremely well. That is an area where it's obviously going to be one that's going to be critical. Future of work, like what Katika has been talking about, but many other industries too. So that's what we're going to be looking out for.
So can I just add one point? I think Vanessa, you have a great point. I think the piece of it that we have to look at is not just about the trend, but it's about how quickly we can deploy those capabilities, right, or those features within the AI world. And I think that's the piece of it that, like, again, as a practitioner, as an operator, those solutions exist, right, thanks to platforms and systems, or companies that you guys have. But there's a lot of legacy that we have to do. So it's about how do we marry those together to enable us to do that, because to your point, COVID has shown a lot of the vulnerabilities that sometimes we've been kind of grappling along with for so long, but we don't have the time anymore. We thought we had the time, right? We don't have the time anymore. And so there is this race to do that. But again, we have to be very mindful and careful of how we diligently and quickly execute against all of those goals or achievements that we need to do. But the pace is on, and I think for startups and new technology, this is absolutely the right time, because there's no better time to really bring, how do you help us solve a problem, whether you're the boardroom of the CEO, CIO, C-suite, we're all open of saying, we need help. How do we bring it to help us do that? But how quickly and how quickly can we deploy this? So, thanks, Vanessa.
I want to come back to that in a second, for me, just around the culture and how do you accelerate that change?
And talent, sorry, and do we have the right talent?
Yeah.
To help us, make that
and leadership as well. There's a question from Uma Ramana Sama. Apologies if I'm not pronouncing that right. Uma, are you there?
Yes, hello, it's fine. My question is, if you could tell your younger self something regarding career exploration, what would it be?
Who wants to take that one first?
I can do it.
Go on, Vanessa.
Oh, so go ahead, Vanessa.
Okay.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, when I was in high school, up until I was in college, I thought I was going to become an astronaut. And like, fast forward where I am today, I'm very far from being an astronaut. And I think like so much of what I've done has been focused on innovation though. So like, what is that thread that really gets you very excited? Because it could come in many different permutations. And so that's like something that I keep on pushing on. And I still ask myself that, like, do I feel energized by what I'm doing? Is it at the forefront of those types of technologies and trends that I'm really interested in? So it's about being very malleable in terms of what that definition is. Sorry, Katika.
Okay, no need to apologize. What would I tell myself?
Yeah.
I would tell myself to not give up and to always believe in myself. That's what I would say, because particularly as a female in mostly male-dominated industries for much of my career, I'm a former full-stack developer. I don't look like a full-stack developer, and so I always. I'm the daughter of an immigrant and a refugee, and the two things that they taught me and left sort of the legacy with me was to always do your best and to never give up. And if I had done those two things, that I could push through whatever fear, like we all have, not just women, but men, women, because we're human, we have that fear that we're not good enough, right? You can call it imposter syndrome, whatever that is, or we're not worthy. And that's just that's a human thing for all of us. And those two principles of always doing my best and never giving up helped me push through a lot of fear, helped me push through a lot of what I sort of knew in my heart I was capable of. Like if I got quiet and listened to my intuition and then was able to push through the noise. And I do believe that you should, that it is not a ladder, that there are different careers you can take, but if you always take that principle with you of who you are and knowing who you are, regardless of what other people think of you, that really helped me to have the confidence to be true to what I knew I was capable of.
Yeah, it's a zigzag. Or is, yeah.
Yeah. And for me, I mean, I think, it's a combination of what the two ladies said. I think it's about believing in yourself and continue to focus on what you enjoy. I happen to have two children, two daughters, and there's always this perception of, well, you want them to be X, and I've always said to my older one, who's a sophomore in college, that whatever you do it for you, right? Be you and enjoy it, and have the belief that you're doing it because you're going to enjoy it. There's no reason of doing things because other people want you to do it, because if you do, then you're going to face resilience, you're going to face adversity. It's that piece of the belief of why am I, going back to why am I doing this, is because I want to, and I believe in it, and I really am enjoying it. It's going to help you push against all those odds. So believe in yourself, be you, and enjoy it.
Thanks for the question, Uma. In the final few minutes, I just want to talk about how we make influential change from the boardroom down. And the pandemic has shone a light on a lot of issues facing businesses, but how do we ensure that the steps companies are taking to create a more equitable workforce, and those that are accelerating digital transformation are sustainable?
I mean, it's not just about the business delivery. I think it's why we're all here today. I mean, Kathika brings up a great point. That's with talent. I think, the COVID 2020 has been a year it will be a year to remember for all of us, right? A history maker. It's not just about COVID. You think about what's going on in the world around Black Lives Matter. You think about, it's just environmental, the fires in the West Coast. There's a whole lot of it that we have to look at. It is not just about the output or the business outcome or the EBITDA or the results from a business perspective, but then how do we sustain, what do we want our brand to be? What do we want to be known for? I think it's an important piece that we need to do, and it needs to start with also the talent. How are we looking at it? Are we having fully inclusive? It's not just about male, female. It's about, are we looking about the race, sexuality, ethnicity, the whole encompasses, because that's what's going to make us better. I think sometimes we just focus on just the output, but it's the how, right? And I think that, to me, is what we need to look at, and we'll always have to keep it as the focus, because I can deliver in spite of. How do I deliver and make it really sustainable, so that I know that everyone else is taken care of, will make me, or make the company that we all represent, the best place to be, because we care about the community, we care about the people, and then we care about what we want to deliver.
And Kathika, how can we come together to really harness the power of different stakeholders to drive for a more inclusive, equitable economy?
This week was the 50th anniversary of Milton Friedman's op-ed, essentially, in the New York Times, talking about shareholder primacy. And why that is what companies should focus on. If COVID has taught us anything, it is that is not true. And there is data to vet that out. Just about a little over a year ago, the Business Roundtable talked about stakeholder capitalism. We have the World Economic Forum talking about the Great Reset. We also know from research from the Great Recession in 2008 that those companies who increase the velocity of their recovery put equity at the core of their crisis management strategy. We need to do two things. One is more business focused, one is not, but I am going to talk about it anyway, because I know I only have a couple minutes, or not even that, 30 seconds if I'm lucky. One is that we need to really use our data in companies to think about how we embrace stakeholder capitalism and truly move more to a more equitable society. Right before COVID last year was the largest income inequality since right before the Great Depression. We have so many people who are suffering in the United States and globally from the economic downturn. We need to use AI and technology as a means for good. The other one is not related to AI or technology, but I will just tell people you need to go vote. That will be the other thing that if you, and if you care, like, you have to vote. As the daughter of an immigrant and a refugee who had those things taken away from them and didn't have a voice, you need to vote.
Thank you. And Vanessa, what's your advice, and how can larger companies support this effort, and what can they learn from some of the smaller organizations in the startup space and vice versa when it comes to better equality?
A lot of larger companies are realizing that it is just simply better business to be equitable. It actually leads to better performance. There's a lot of data supporting that, just in terms of how diversity actually leads to better returns. And you see that very clearly now in the startup landscape, even though the VC world needs to catch up with that. And so a lot of the nimbleness that startups have when it comes to who do you craft around the table as your leadership team and who is on your board, you can think about that from the get-go. You have the privilege of doing that. Actually, not many startups take advantage of that, and that's actually what corporates are really good at, being very thoughtful about who's on their leadership team and how can they shape the board, because when you're a startup, you're just relying on your networks. That's something that startups can learn from. But it's the nimbleness, the fact that you can change so quickly, and the fact that you can see the impact quite quickly. That's the type of data that companies are now starting to apply and realize that for them, it's also just as important. And luckily, I think a lot of corporations are starting to wake up to that.
Thank you. And Fumbi, close us out here. What are you hopeful for, and advice on the how?
Oh, hopeful. There's a lot I'm hopeful for. I think there's a lot of conversations that we're all having in different, channels, roundtables, conferences, even in boardrooms or in executive rooms, around how we need to be better and how we need to be more inclusive and how we need to relook at ourselves and really ask those hard, difficult questions about the unconscious bias that exists at the moment, that we often don't. And I think that's the first piece of it. And I think if we continue with that conversation and actually hear, listen, and execute what they're telling us, the world will be in a better place. And I think once we can start from that, whether it's a return, whether it's equity, whether it's growth, we will get through to it.
Thank you so much, Fumbi, Vanessa, Katika. I really appreciate you joining us today for the Women in Worth Summit. Thank you, and wishing you all the best with the next few months, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.